Welcome back to another episode of Out of Touch. John Alden, Dustin Schutte, and Mitchell Page coming at you, not live, but pre-recorded from the unsponsored studios with our wonderful wooded background, our beautiful beachy style of music, whatever you want to call this thing. It's a good day. It's a Thursday. If you're listening to this on the day it's released, I want to give a quick shout out actually to my wife. It's our 4th anniversary today, March 21st. Got married right in the middle of not even really the middle, right at the beginning of the pandemic back in 2020. So happy anniversary to my wife. She may even be hearing me record this, right? She might be like, why are you patronizing me at the very beginning of your podcast? But I wanted to start off by wishing her a happy anniversary just because I know it's important. And I cannot believe it's been 4 years. But anyway, enough about me.
Well, happy anniversary, man.
Happy anniversary, yes.
Well, thank you.
That's not enough about you. We're going to make the whole show about you and your wife's love.
I am,
4 years.
Even though it may be weird to say this, considering I am in a profession where, I essentially try to make content for a living or take part in content, but I'm not a fan of being the center of attention. And I think it just makes me uncomfortable. I like to kind of just sit back and do my own thing, but I do this because it's fun, not because I'm, trying to be the next freaking Howard Stern. No one's going to be that. Howard Stern is a man of his own. No one will ever be that.
Sounds like you want to be that. Like, why is that the first name that popped into your head? I haven't thought about Howard Stern in 10 years.
Well, the reason I say Howard Stern is I feel like if you're somebody in the radio world or, the broadcasting world,
that's fair.
You can't think of him. You can't not think of him as, I should say, as somebody who at least influenced you in some way. And not that influence is more like when I look at him, I see him as somebody who was not afraid to put himself out there in literally any way. And I could never be that, for one, because he crossed lines that were never crossed before. And I don't want to say haven't been crossed since, because that's not true. But the things he got away with back when he was, I guess, first making it big in the world of radio, I think most people who did those kinds of things, if they tried doing that today, they'd probably get canceled before they had a chance to even get their career off the ground. Mitchell, we lost you for some reason. You're talking, but you're.
I muted myself. I had to.
There we go.
I had to ruffle around some stuff, so I muted myself. But it's interesting to talk about cancel. Do you feel like, at least in certain aspects, the world is? I feel like everything is always cyclical, right? Like, the biggest example of this is cable TV, where everyone's like, "Oh, cable companies are the worst. If we just divvy it all up, we don't have to pay as much." But now we're all just paying for 55 streaming services. It all costs the exact same. And now all the companies are merging back together. Like, now you don't have to go searching for everything. It's all in one place. And it's just DirecTV 2.0. That's kind of what I'm talking about. But it feels like people are starting to get tired of everybody canceling everybody. And there is a lot more, I almost said a thing that I should not say, but like, I don't care mentality. I was going to say F it, but I should not say that. Kind of like, I don't care. I'm tired of this. Everyone do whatever they want to do, but it's not like do it over there kind of deal.
I think what happened, like, in 2020, there became like such, and I'm not even going to give specific examples of things, but there just became such a mob mentality.
Yes.
That anybody who had ever done anything wrong ever in the history of their life was basically like, and to an extent, like, obviously if there's some people that did some really bad stuff, then yeah, they should be punished no matter when it was, right? Or they should be quote unquote canceled. But there are like things that would be not even the least bit controversial, and somebody would try to get them canceled. And I think it's like part of this social media push that, like, at a time I thought that like 50% of what people tweeted, they didn't even believe. They just wanted likes and retweets.
Yes.
Like, they just wanted to fit in and be part of the conversation. And I feel like that still happens, but it's way, way. And like, I don't even care if it's stuff that's not important. Like, if it's about sports, I don't care. Like, that's not important. But when it's like people's livelihoods and things of that nature is when it makes a big difference. But I think you're right, because like, it seems like since maybe 2022, maybe early 2023, that stuff has kind of dissipated, at least from what I see. I also then disconnect from a lot as much as I can, so maybe I just don't see it as much.
I think I'm the same way, because I'm kind of along. I feel like I'm in the same line of thinking as you, Dustin, and Mitchell, because you're the one, I guess, who started this thought process of
give me all the credit
of the fact that, yeah, obviously the cancel culture, I guess, effect still exists, but it's not nearly what it was 4 or 5 years ago. And I think that's for the better. If more people have the ability to speak their minds, then that can only be a good thing, right?
I think what we learned from that was like, when people are really bored, they get really angry.
Yes.
That's
and they
true.
don't know how to like deal with them. Like, and I, to like an extent, I don't blame, like, because what were we supposed to do? So everybody just got unbelievably angry and just outrageous things were happening.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. One thing, this is another thing that I've noticed, and maybe this is just because I moved back to Indiana and everybody's been inside for so long that they finally had some sunlight, so they went outside. But I have noticed more kids playing outside during the day than I have in like the last 10 years.
Yes.
They're just outside doing nothing.
Yep.
Like nothing. They don't have a phone. They're not messing. They're just kind of doing nothing. And that is so cool, because that's exactly what I did. And it felt like with the rise of Twitter and Instagram and social media, iPhones, everybody's got iPads. There was a generation that lived behind the screen, and it feels like maybe my generation and probably a little bit younger were like at the very beginning of that and lived kind of a step behind the group that was always with that, but they always had the phone. Like I've had a phone since I was in 6th grade. And when you've had it that long, we're starting to have kids now. You're like, I realize that this is not a good thing. I need to make sure that they're outside. And I've noticed that 3 or 4 times, and it's in Indiana. I'm obviously spending a lot of time in Michigan. There's in different neighborhoods and throughout Michigan, Detroit, Grand Rapids, all the way up north, all over the state of Indiana. But I started to notice it even in North Carolina, where the weather's obviously nicer, but parks are busier. People are walking on the street downtown. It's really cool to see. It feels like, again, we're talking about cycles. The world just goes in cycles, and history is, repeated every day, but it's a good repetition.
I think I agree, because I've noticed that a lot more here walking around like Brownsburg. It's like I just saw 6 kids the other day jumping on a trampoline. Like, and they didn't have a phone. They just they had like a ball and a trampoline and were just running into each other, wreaking havoc. I'm sure there were broken bones, and it's just so refreshing to see that. But like, I also think now in Indiana, I believe my acquaintance, I believe, told me this, and this happened a few years ago. I believe the state of Indiana like pushed money back into cities so that they could do like, I don't know if reconstruction is the right word, but like rebuild and like put money towards local things. And I think that makes a big difference, because like when I lived in Kennesaw, Georgia, everything was local and everybody was outside all the time. We had a open container law when you were downtown. So you could go to a barbecue restaurant, have a beer, have your lunch, and then if you wanted to walk around downtown and visit shops or check out music or whatever, as long as you were within that area, you could take your drink with you. And it encouraged people.
European.
It is very European, but it was so much fun, and like the streets were always busy. Like, I think a big thing is when you invest and when you have different things you can go to, different restaurants, different breweries, distilleries, shops, and all that stuff's local. People want to go out and support their local. They don't want to go to Walmart. Like, yeah, you want to go to Walmart because you can get a microphone for $7.
Speaking of,
But-
this thing's broken, so got to get them.
But it's but when you know the people, like I think that there's, and I don't know if this is countrywide or just in certain states. I noticed it big time in Georgia. Maybe you noticed it. Charleston's kind of a unique, like, big city, but when you're in that downtown, it's also like very local stuff. And
Charleston's unique. Charleston is very, I don't. Is transitive the right word? I don't know. It feels like there's no locals anymore there. Like
they're all like expats.
Transplants.
Yeah,
I think that's the word you're thinking
like
of.
The locals have which sucks. I was a part of the problem, so that's why I'm comfortable talking about it. It's so expensive to live there,
Right.
that people that have been there forever, pretty much before COVID. This is a very recent thing. It was expensive because it was really nice, but it's certainly not a Ritz-Carlton type city. Like, you're not going to find a 5-star hotel really there. But during COVID, I think the city grew like 300% or something in terms of population. Like, it went through the roof, and everything got super expensive. Food got expensive. Housing's expensive. If you want a studio apartment in downtown Charleston, a decent one, it's going to be $2,500 probably minimum. So all the people that have been there for a long time that had the local shops, you think about the local market, especially the people, because everybody talks about Market Street, right? Like, they have the big, you can buy local picture frames or little like trinkets, been there forever. The people that run those shops aren't making millions of dollars doing that. They all got pushed out and farther, either west or north of the city, not necessarily east, because Mount Pleasant and Isle of Palms, if you're familiar with Charleston, you know that those places are buku bucks. But it's just, that's been kind of an interesting thing in Charleston. But it is cool to still, I mean, even though they're transplants, they're still outside to bring everything kind of back. I don't know. The world just seems like it's going back to the year 2000.
That is, I'm sorry. I'm taking in everything that you all were just saying, just because there really is kind of a renaissance, I guess, if you will, of people realizing the value of not even just disconnecting from your phone, but being outside. And one of those things I've noticed, and I know we talked about the yard work and stuff last week, like, even though I had all of the issues that I went through to go, to get my yard cut and stuff like that, that's probably the most healthy that I've felt whenever I was doing that kind of stuff outside. I don't know if it's because
100%.
you're out in the sunlight and it just feels good, that kind of thing. But one thing I've noticed about me is whenever I go more than an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I've done nothing but consume media one way or another, whether that be listening to music, watching a TV show, playing a video game, whatever it might be, if I go longer than that time frame, and maybe part of this is just getting older, and I know being in your 20s isn't old, but I feel like whenever I was younger, I could do all that stuff for way longer periods of time and not feel sick, like to my stomach whenever I'm doing that kind of stuff. And I think obviously the overconsumption is part of it. I don't want to make it seem like it's because I'm in my 20s now and not a teenager, but it's weird being aware of the effect that how that kind of stuff, the effect it has on your body whenever we're sometimes really not even conscious of it. I feel like
the last 4 years, all I've done is just get fat because I just sit inside and do nothing. And in the last couple months, you realize like this is not good, and you go outside and immediately, like, I haven't lost really that much weight, but I feel a lot better. I don't know.
Like, I know COVID wasn't a great time, like, for what was going on in the world, but it almost felt like because we didn't know what to do, at least this is from my experience, I felt like it was so much easier to enjoy being outside. It's because we didn't, at least some of us didn't have the responsibilities of going to work, depending on what kind of job you had. So both my wife and I, we would spend 30 minutes to an hour every day walking around our apartment complex, because it wasn't like a typical dinky apartment complex. It had, some nice scenery around it if you wanted to walk around and that kind of stuff.
Suave, yeah. Only the best.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't like the Ritz-Carlton, if you will. It wasn't like an expensive apartment complex. It was a nice suburban, I guess is the best way to say it. But
I did, what? I was thinking about this, and the reason I thought about this while we were talking about it is I'm currently drinking an energy drink because I'm exhausted, and it is 9:15, which is.
And I've had 4 cups of coffee today.
Probably
so one that I just finished.
Function at this. I can't have a cup of coffee after like 2 p.m.
Yeah, see, that's what I have coming for me in the future. That's what 10 years down the road looks like for me, Dustin.
I'm
like that's a backhanded compliment, but whatever.
Yeah, I'm excited to not have to drink these anymore. But every time I think of COVID, there was a stretch of like a month straight. We were talking about video games, because everything that you're talking about, like watching YouTube, I love watching YouTube videos, all different kinds of stuff. If you were to see my YouTube recommended, there's do-it-yourself projects, there's video game streamers, there's history documentaries. When I got home from work today, I watched a documentary about Eminem. Like, I'm watching all different kinds of stuff. But I can only do that for so long. Video games, on the other hand, I can still.
You can still marathon it. I can't go more than 2 hours with anything. I feel honestly like I'm not going to say a bad word, but I feel like a weak ass. Is that okay to say? I feel like the fact that I can't do anything, and maybe I think it's healthy in a way.
It is. It's better. I could sit up, and my wife, Laura, I know you're listening. I love you. Keep rocking it. I'm sure she's frustrated because I'll go in to play video games at like 9 o'clock and like just one game. And then all my friends log on, and then it's 3 a.m. and you don't even know what happened, and you'd had a blast the entire time, and you're mad that everyone's getting off because you wanted to keep playing. I still have those nights. But back to my original thing in COVID, there was a month stretch. Did you ever play the original Warzone?
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
So I'm not a big multiplayer gamer. Like I played, I went through a Fortnite phase and all that kind of stuff, but I've never been a big like Call of Duty guy or anything.
I think that. And I've had this conversation a lot, and there's a lot of people that talk about this, but like video games are like they're looked down upon, and I think you can be addicted to video games where like it consumes your whole life. But that's how I connect with all of my friends still. I have 2 separate group chats going constantly of, hey, are you getting on? But also talking about all kinds of different things. It's like the male version of the 2-hour-long female FaceTime. Like that's where I find out what's going on with my buddy's life in between games. Hey, how are you doing? How's work? Changing jobs. It's the golf course at night. And I think
that's what increases like your ability to be on for several hours.
100%.
Not only like it's more about the conversation than the game, even though the game is a part of it.
Obviously. I doubt that there's very many people that are playing Warzone just constantly like I do that are listening to this. But if you just play the game, like if I just go on and play by myself, I can last like 30 minutes. It's brutal. It's miserable. I have zero fun. But when all my friends are on there, it's like hanging out with them. Did you ever, when you were younger, have your buddies like bring their Xbox to your house and bring a TV and you're
that kind of stuff,
playing right next to each other?
Go in the parents' basement.
Oh gosh, yeah. So I guess I'm still in a way doing that, but I do want to get this out because you'll appreciate this. When the original Warzone came out, it was massive. Everyone was playing it, and it had the unique timing of coming out right before COVID happened. So it's this brand new game. It's this mass multiplayer, and you can level up your guns. It's just a really cool, fresh take on games. And all my buddies were playing it. COVID happens. I think I went a month straight. This is so bad to admit. Where I would walk down the street to the gas station to get a Monster in the morning. This is like 8 a.m. and I would come back, crack it open, fire up the game, and I would be on there with all my friends. We lived in a house during COVID. There was 3 of us in the house. One buddy was playing in his room. The other buddy was playing in his room, and I was playing in mine. We were 25 feet from each other, but we only communicated via the headset, and we would play for 12 hours straight.
My gosh.
It was like a month straight of this. It was a serious problem, but that's what COVID makes me think of. And
COVID gave you the excuse for almost anything, really.
Oh my gosh. It was crazy. It was so much fun, but yeah, I think that that time, it made me kind of realize like how important connecting with people was. And now that we actually we can go out and do things, it's just been a slow, gradual transition from getting out from behind the screen and getting back into the world. Like I think, especially when I was in college, I was going to practice, coming home, sitting doing nothing, going back to meetings, coming home, sitting doing nothing, watching TV. And I didn't do like I went to school at Indiana. It's one of the most beautiful campuses in the country. And I didn't experience it near as much as I probably should have, or some other people did, because of the screens. And over the last couple of years, I definitely have noticed it in myself, trying to break out of that. And I think that my friend group for sure, and especially outside of that to younger generations, just reappreciating how awesome the world can be when you get out from behind the screen. And this is a deep way to start. We've been talking 20 minutes, pretty deep. But,
I know, this is nuts.
It just is. I was thinking about that a lot today. I spend a lot of time on the road, so I have a lot of time to think. And that's what's been on my mind recently, is how many people are outside enjoying each other's presence, sitting doing nothing by a fire. It's just really cool. It's a really cool change in the world that I think is happening.
You know what I think is really funny, and I wish I could go back in time and like slap my younger self, because I think it was 2020 when I just kind of discovered hiking. Like, you got to get out of the house, you got to do something, because I wasn't a huge, like, I would play NCAA 14.
Oh, it's the greatest game ever made.
I would play like 2 or 3 games, and then I'd be done with it. But I haven't played video games in probably like 3 or 4 years at least.
I do have to interject. Did you know I was in that game?
Yeah, we've talked about this.
Okay. I love
because they made your character an African American.
And he sucked. Every time that game, that's like my favorite story of my past ever. It is so funny. Every time I hear about it, I have to tell that. So sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. The last time we talked about it, I was going to actually, like, because for people who don't know, you could do like a Heisman campaign and you could select one player. You could either create your own, or you could select an already taken player. My disc wouldn't work anymore, but I was going to take Mitchell and see if I could turn him into a Heisman Trophy candidate. I don't know
when that game came out. I told you this probably. I put myself in. I had to bench myself. He was so bad, I put me back on the bench. So that would have been a long, long journey.
It would have been
race to the Heisman for me.
But I just think about, like, so my mom lived in Georgia from when I was in junior high.
Mm-hmm.
And she used to try to take us on all these trips and outdoors and go hiking and this stuff. And me, being a dumb 14, 15, 16-year-old, was like, why would I want to do that? I just want to play MLB The Show for 12 hours. I just want to watch, like, I don't know what the show was called. But whose line is it anyway? I just want to watch The Simpsons, whatever. And I would just complain about it constantly and didn't appreciate it. And then fast forward to 2020, and now all I want to do is go hiking and be outside. And I'm like, if I could have just appreciated it when I was like 15 or 16, man.
Yeah. But I almost feel like, and I was thinking about this earlier when either you or Mitchell was talking, I don't feel like it's possible, and this may be a very immature statement, I guess. I don't feel like it's possible for the younger generation to appreciate that kind of stuff, because our interests are just, we're so narrow-minded, and we grow up. I mean, obviously the things that we like are valid whenever we're at that age, but at the same time, I don't know what it is. I just don't feel like it's in us as human beings at the age of 15 or 16 to really grasp how, I don't know, how I feel like I'm being very corny, be like how very magnificent like a nice outdoor scenery can be.
100%. I think Dustin wants to interject. I agree with you 100%, John. Go ahead.
I disagree. I think I don't think it's a lot, but I think there are kids out there who do, like, they
Definitely.
get it right away.
Definitely.
Like, and I wish I would bet maybe if there's, let's see, I would bet maybe like 20 to 25% of kids get it. Like, that's a very small, but I wish I was in that minority. Because
it's probably people
like
who grew up and that's all, like, they didn't have all the technology. It's people who grow up poor, and people say that's a disadvantage, which obviously it is, but they were forced to appreciate things that people who maybe grew up with more money didn't have to. They weren't forced to appreciate it the way that they were.
I just wish I could go to a campground and set up a tent like it's no problem. Like, I wish I could I can get it set up. I can set up a tent on my own, but it's going to take me a while, and it looks like I have no clue what I'm doing. I wish I could do, like, have you ever seen those videos of people that just, like, go camping and know how to do everything without asking a single question, and yet still don't get attacked by a bear?
I was watching a Survivor Man. Do you remember that show?
Yes.
I do.
I was that. Speaking of weird, that's also on my recommended on YouTube. This dude, yeah, I would love to be that guy that can just go out. He's got nothing and just figure it out. I don't understand. I changed my brake pads the other day.
Same.
I felt like, don't say same. It's hard to do. Okay.
I didn't do. I was. Let me fine. If you're gonna sit there and so I didn't do them myself. My stepdad guided me through it. I don't know how to do it myself.
My father-in-law guided me through the first one. I did it by myself for the first time. I had to take the car for a spin without Laura in the car, make sure that the brakes actually did function. They do, but that is a little side. I think that when you're young, it's so hard, and this is more into like human psychology, I guess, but you're narrow-minded. Yeah, narrow-minded is a great way to put it. When you're young, it feels like the entire world is at your middle school. Like, that's the only thing that matters. You're only doing what your friends are doing because you want to be accepted by them. You have no experience. You don't understand how hard your parents are working to give you a good life. It doesn't matter. You don't appreciate any of it. The only thing that matters to you is seeing if the girl that sits next to you in math likes you. Like, that's the only thing that matters. And as I've gotten older and gone out on my own, lived away from my parents, now having a kid and being married, it really is, I think everybody has this moment at a different time. You start to appreciate, one, the world is so much bigger and there's so much more going on. You are not even close to the most important person. I don't care if you're Jeff Bezos. You are not the most important person in the world. There's people that have issues all over the place. But more importantly and more close to home, you appreciate how hard it was for your parents. Like, how much stress they must have been under. Are you guys firstborn?
Yes.
Yes.
Same. Like, before you were born, how scared your parents were. And I saw, this is all on YouTube. It's all on YouTube. It was a dad, and he was talking about his firstborn kid. And I'm going to try not to tear up because I was kind of crying earlier. But thinking about, like, when you have your first kid, everything that they're experiencing for the first time, you're experiencing too. Like, if they get bullied at school, this is your first time dealing with your kid getting bullied at school. So you don't really know how to handle it. So everything that you're like, my younger sister, if something happened to her that had happened to me, my parents may not have been the best equipped, but they had some experience. I'm starting to think about my daughter coming. Everything that she experiences for the first time is going to be my first experience too. And I have no clue what I'm doing. And everyone experiences that, but you don't appreciate it until you're in those shoes. So over the past like 6 months or so, just reflecting, I definitely don't tell my parents this enough, but like how scary, cool, and hard it is to do what you're doing. And I think that gives you a little bit bigger worldview, which maybe is why it's a little easier to appreciate when you're out on a hike and it's completely quiet and you're with your dogs and there's nothing.
Right.
How hard it is to appreciate quiet when you're young and everything seems like it's happening 1,000 miles an hour and that's the exact way you want it. How much you appreciate the quiet sometimes, because I don't get quiet hardly at all anymore unless I'm outside and away from everything. So I think it does take a little bit of maturing and experience and age, and I don't think it's a bad thing that kids are rebellious, but it just takes time.
My wife told me this the other day, or she might have shown me a video that said this, but no matter what age or generation we are, like we have ourselves, we have our siblings, parents, grandparents, every single one of us are still experiencing life for the first time.
Right.
So we may still view our parents as somebody who, like, they've lived longer, but it's also like if you have parents who, let's just say they're turning 55 tomorrow's their first time experiencing 55. And then
they have the
55
same insecurities that you do.
You're right.
Exactly.
They don't want to be 55. They want to be 20.
Right.
Just
and we
the
sit there
same
and
way
think,
that I
we're
wanna
like,
be
man, we
15.
can't even fathom being that. And at the same, like, whether we don't have to fathom it now at the age that we're at, we're also not going to be able to fathom it 30 years down the road whenever we're closer to that age, or at least, me being 26.
My sister is being induced to have my mom and dad's first grandkid on Friday. And they're going to be grandparents for the first time.
Yeah.
And that is a completely different dynamic than having your first kid that you're totally responsible for. Now they get kind of all the fun parts. It's like somebody else's, this is going to sound worse than I mean it, but it's like going over to someone else's house and they have a dog. Like you get to play with the dog, you love the dog, and then when they're crying in the middle of the night, you get to go home. So they get to experience all the good stuff of life, new life. And it's a cool experience, but probably a hard one because time moves fast. I'm already 30. I'm going to be a parent for the first time. They're going to be grandparents. Now they're 2 generations younger than them in the family, and that is probably a pretty scary realization. My grandma and grandpa, there's 3 generations younger than them now. That's just and this is their first time. So it just is, you start to appreciate, one, fragility. Everything is so fragile and can happen in an instant, but it is, you have to start appreciating things as they come because it goes so fast. Doesn't it? It just goes so fast.
Do you know what the biggest wake up call to me, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of it because I wouldn't be able to handle the emotion of it. But like the first time you go through, like with your parents, whether it's like an illness or an addiction or whatever the case might be, like when you come to the realization that they aren't invincible and that they are also people and deal with the same stuff, like that was and it wasn't until I was like out of college and you have to go through some real world stuff with your parents that it's like, wow, they are not always going to be there to like cook me dinner and fold my, like I make light of it, but like they're real people too, going through like real life struggles while we thought that they were just, they hated us because they made us go to our room because we didn't want to take out the trash or whatever the case was.
Because I've been playing video games for way too long.
That's the other thing. Like our parents, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but at least from our perspective, from what I've gained with what you're saying, our parents must have done such a good job at, and not that they meant, this might sound negative, I don't want it to come off that way, but at making us feel like we were special in our own little worlds and that everything we did was special because they made it all about us. And again, sometimes people hear that and they're like, well, you might be a pretty selfish human being. I would like to think that. I don't think either of us 3 are very selfish, I wouldn't think, but it's one of those things like when we look back on childhood and we Dustin, you mentioned like our parents seeming invincible. We view them like that because they made us feel safe. They made us, they helped us enjoy life in ways that we didn't realize how good they were until we got older. And I think that's, looking back, is something to be very appreciative of, obviously.
And I think too of like, I mean, we can end it after this, but like my parents went through a divorce. Mitchell, did you said your parents went through a divorce?
I was just about to bring that up.
Gosh,
like,
we're all a little too similar. Firstborns and
like,
divorced parents.
We've all been through breakups. I'm not getting into specifics of why mine is more closely related, but like when you go through that, it's tough. Like, it is tough. I cannot imagine going through that with kids. Like, no. It's just like, whatever they did, they hid so well. How much pain they had to hide, 100%. And like sadness, anger, all of that stuff. It's just, it's crazy. Like,
I had this, and I think this is, you said we're not selfish. I would argue pretty much every kid is pretty selfish. So
yeah, I guess I was more so trying to relate it to how we turned out to be.
Agree.
That makes sense.
Yeah, agree. But I'm thinking of sophomore Mitchell, just so into sports and chasing girls or whatever the heck I was doing as a 5'2" sophomore.
Can we play that highlight video that has all the expletives in it?
Yeah, I was at least 5'3", but like I just had no clue that any of this was happening. And when they told me that they were splitting up, it felt like it came out of nowhere.
Right.
And the ability, like obviously it didn't, right? They're dealing with stuff that I just had no clue. And to be able to continue to give me the appearance that I was safe at home, and it's not like anything bad was happening, but like I could go to basketball practice and go to football, and that was my sole focus. For them to be able to do that and not allow me to see that, one, had to have been impossible. Two, gave me the ability to kind of like focus enough to be able to do some pretty cool things. Like if they would have let me, and I think there's a lot of different ways to handle this, but if I would have been maybe a little more observative, I'm sure that if I was a little more outside of my own world, I could have seen some things, but I was able to stay on a one-track mind to do what I wanted to do, what I was dreaming to do. And now that I'm not divorcing my wife, I love my wife very much, but like I struggle. There's all kinds. You worry about financial stuff. You worry about health. You worry about safety. You worry about everything. And you do your best to try to conceal how much you're worried about stuff to make sure that your significant other, your kids can just wake up and feel good and be happy. And you not keep everything in, but you try to control your emotions to make sure that everyone around you is feeling like they can be themselves and chase everything they want to do. And that's we all have the same experience. It sounds like how strong you have to be, and you don't appreciate that until I think you do get a little bit older and you, again, have some experiences, because you don't appreciate it near as much as you should. And if there's kids listening to this, go on the hike with mom and dad. Like,
yeah, exactly. Go camping.
Because I know there's a lot of things that I wish I would have done and asked to do, and you can't go back. So this is now 40 minutes of deep talk.
This is insane.
This is like what I've been dealing with in my. I was having this conversation with Laura a couple weeks ago. It just is how hard it is to just have responsibilities. It's hard. Yeah. It is.
Really, one thing I've wanted this podcast to be, and I think we've been slowly inching towards something like this, is I want it to be something where we're not afraid to talk about these kinds of things. And again, we've always kind of talked about it in a sense, and I know we've always wanted it to be organic. and I don't know, we talk a lot of goofy stuff too, and that's kind of the point. It doesn't always have to be doom and gloom,
Yeah.
and I know that's
Sometimes
not what
we're out
this
of
is,
touch,
but
I feel like this is a pretty in touch episode.
here's the thing:
Very
we came into this out of touch, but we're learning to get in touch with ourselves and with the things that we're doing. Like that's. Oh my gosh!
In the show, John.
We
God.
can't end it though. Because there's things about my life that I want to eventually be able to share on here. That, I mean, it's not. I mean,
I'm gonna cry.
I'll leave
show.
it at
I'll
that.
be the first one that does it, so you guys can do it too. If you know me at all, I wear my emotions on both sleeves. There is, in an environment that I can,
Yep.
they flood. They flood out, and I can't do anything about it. And I think that kind of goes back to how it must have been so hard, because I didn't just happen. Like, my emotions didn't go on my sleeve just because my parents gave that to me. So how hard that must have been to not be that
See,
way.
I'm almost the opposite. Like, I don't really know who to blame for it, and I don't think there is any specific person to blame. But
John is a robot.
I've learned over time that I am way more emotional as a human being by myself, and specifically when it comes to things like anger. Like, I've never, first of all, I've never hurt anybody. I've never hurt myself. I've never done anything that's, been completely off the rails, if you will. But even just today, looking back on things that maybe got me agitated, I'll look back a few minutes after the experience of being frustrated or angry, and I'll sit there and be like, why did I just explode the way that I did? There's nobody around to react to why I was just so angry. It's almost like I was using the alone time to get emotions out that I don't express around other people, because I've just been trained over time to, for some reason, not share my emotions, I guess. I hope I'm articulating all of that in a good enough way.
I think you are, because I kind of do the same thing. And I think, and I'm sure that there's some sort of actual like psychology behind it, but in my mind, if I'm at home like by myself and let's just say I'm having a bad day or rough week or whatever, I don't have anybody else to express that to. I'm just sitting there, and I have a tendency to, when you're in that bad state of mind, the train just keeps on rolling. You see the snowball growing, and you can only think about bad things that have happened and the bad outcomes that are waiting for you. And so that's what you dwell on, and it just makes me angrier and angrier. If I have somebody to talk to, I don't get that, because I will share it. I'm like, it is way better for me to just like talk about it, because then I just don't feel as bad anymore.
And I think that's very healthy. And the unhealthy side of me comes from thinking, oh, if I share this with someone, even somebody like my wife, like, there's things that I don't like to share all the time because I'm worried I'm an inconvenience. And that's just the immaturity in me. And I've honestly, through 4 years of marriage, since it is now 4 years, I've gotten better at that to an extent. But I know that I'm far from perfect when it comes to knowing that I should share those kinds of things with not only my wife, but other people who are close to me.
I feel like some of that is probably societal too, where like we're like men are, and it's like this, like, men are supposed to be the rock. We're not supposed to have emotion. We're not supposed to talk about our feelings. Get out of my head,
Dustin. That's
and being an inconvenience.
I was just about to ask, do you ever feel like you have to be the rock? That was going to be my question. So that's so funny that you used that exact word.
I don't. It's interesting that you ask it that way. I don't know that I feel like I have to, like. Okay, I talk about your YouTube videos. I've seen this on Instagram before, and I think that this is, I feel like this is how Abby and I's relationship are, and I don't know if this is how you guys, I'm sure it is, because you guys have both successful marriages, but there was this woman talking, and I don't know if she was a professional or just a random woman who had been married a while, but she was like, the notion that marriage is 50-50 is BS, basically, because it's not like everybody's always charged at 100%, or everybody's always charged at 50%. Like, so the thought is like, she would come home and be like, and she would be like, look, I've got 20. And the husband's like 20%. I'm at 20%. The husband's like, that's great. I'm at 90. I'll pull you the rest of the way. I'll do whatever it takes. And then if they were like, both like, hey, it's been a really rough week, we're both at 25 today, they'd sit down, have a little powwow, and like, here's what our plan is. That way we don't like fight and
Yeah.
you know, and that's not to say they don't ever fight. People, you know, when you live with someone that long, but the way I feel in my relationship with Abby is like, if I'm ever having a really bad day and she's doing great, she will pull me along. She'll pull me along that extra 75% that I need. And I try to do the same for her if she's ever having a bad day or a rough time or whatever. So I don't know that I feel like I have to be the rock, but if I ever like pick up on, hey, she's having a rough time, you carry the 70%. That's when I would feel like that.
Yeah. I've definitely seen that video. She's awesome.
She is awesome.
She's got a couple, the 80-20, Laura and I have used that before. There's plenty of days when I'm at 20 and Laura brings 100. So, that's and it's important to talk like that, because I think it gets dangerous if you've only got 20, but you don't say anything about it.
Right.
Because then you feel like the other person, you didn't say anything. The other person's like, okay, well, are they mad at me? And then you talk about the snowball. Now all of a sudden, a problem that's not a problem becomes a problem in their mind, and then they didn't say anything, and now you're like, well, what's wrong with them? And that's how big problems happen. So I definitely need to do it. I am, when it comes to like serious emotions on my sleeve, is talking about stuff like this. Like I'm happy to go all out. Emotions come out. But when it's time to actually talk about nitty gritty stuff, I try to be solid all the time.
Yeah.
No matter what I'm dealing with, I try to stay solid. And I think it's a good idea in theory, but over the course of time, it wears you down. And if you don't say anything, eventually the day is going to come where you're done. You're out. You're tapped.
Yeah.
And
you've seen me come onto the show that way. I mean, I don't think I've never been completely out of line, I don't think, but
no,
there's been plenty of times where I come on here and I express that I'm burnt out or pissed off about something or feeling like I don't have enough time to recharge. I know it's not just me. I just feel like I'm usually the one who comes on here expressing it, because sometimes I may show up frustrated for whatever the reason may be.
Yeah. I do the same. I have the same feelings, bro. Same struggles, man. It's funny. And we've never even talked about it until we're on episode 34. It's taken us 33 episodes.
But that's all right, though. Sometimes you have to break here's the thing. The great thing about podcasts and you know, long form episodes and stuff like that is there's a lot of it that gets, I guess, put into this category of like, you know, learning how to speak to people, learning how to speak with each other over a platform like this, being entertaining, and also learning to be being vulnerable, because this might sound really weird and meta, as I often get, but like we're creating a relationship with an audience. And part of that is learning to be ourselves, but sometimes there's a line that we're afraid to cross. Like, we don't want somebody to know too much about us who may not know us at all. And obviously, us being a small podcast, most of the people who listen to this are people that we know, or maybe there's those who have discovered us and they don't know much about us. But there is still that uncomfortability of saying something that maybe you wouldn't normally say in everyday life to a certain person.
I think that the reason we started this podcast was like, I don't know if event session is the right thing, but it's like, it was our time to have like an hour of just guys talking, whatever we want to talk about. And for the most part, John and Mitchell, this has been like, it's always been really fun. And a lot of times it's lighthearted. But I do hope that when we do have these type of episodes, when we're willing to express ourselves, I just hope that if one person listens and's like, I'm not the only one going through this, there are other people. Like, I hope that somebody hears that and is like, I feel better, because I hope one of our 18 listeners goes, I feel better because I know that I'm not the only one going through. So that's like why I'm not afraid to share it, because I feel like if I would have heard this listening, like there was an episode of, you guys listen to Smartless?
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, Bradley Cooper, who I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty because we're already 50 minutes in, but basically, this was a guy who's super famous, did The Hangover, did a lot of movies, knew a lot of people, and he was the least confident person. Like, he had no self-confidence. And I could relate to that because I can put on a good show, but I have I'm getting better at it, but I had no self-confidence. And so just hearing that, like, hey, even people who are really popular and cool, which is what we all are, very popular and cool, can go through this stuff. So I hope that even though we got a little deep and maybe it's not the, funniest episode, hopefully somebody takes away from this, hey, I'm not alone in going through this.
I mean, today's one of those shows that, and sorry, if Mitchell, if you want to add to that real quick.
I was just going to say real quick, it's funny, like sometimes I think there's probably been 1 or 2 episodes that I feel like, all right, just a little bit longer. We got to get to an hour, 45 minutes. I feel like we've been talking for 5 minutes and it's already 50.
Right. Yeah.
It is fun. Like you could talk about this is real life stuff. And everyone, whether it's 18 or 18,000, everyone has experienced at least some form of what we're talking about. And I think the world has gotten a lot more open. We talk about the changing world with technology, people being outside. And I think that that's a small change, big change on the grand scale, but being able to talk about stuff, I think is a relatively new phenomenon. And it's, I think, one of the best things to happen to society, males specifically, being able to talk about stuff. Girls are just a lot better at it. They always have been.
Right.
They always will be. Like I said, it took us 33. If this was a girls on a podcast, it would have took them 30 seconds, and it would have been a lot more efficient and probably effective. But
and there's times where I feel like we've dove into it, but not for an entire episode. Like I remember you and I, Mitchell, we did an episode where we talked about just childhood and visiting our old neighborhoods and that kind of stuff. That was kind of honestly the birth of this kind of
it was such a like it felt like we were at ground level and then we made it to the first step, and now maybe we're at like this third step, and eventually we'll all be sobbing on this podcast. That will be the 10th step, the final boss. We're gonna get there. That'll probably be episode 334, but it just is. It's important to. This is real stuff, especially in the times that we're at in our lives. We talk about being at different stages, but not really, right? We're 10 years apart or whatever, but we're all kind of dealing with the same bull every day.
Yeah. Yep.
We are.
Exactly.
We are, and this has been one of my favorite episodes by far.
Yeah. I'm glad we did it because, I mean, the only thing on my list of things that we might talk about that we hit on was me just wishing my wife a happy anniversary. Which I'm glad that's what I mentioned.
It is.
Yeah, and it's all because that is weird to think about.
My anniversary's in 5 days.
Really?
Happy anniversary.
So together until this moment. So, Laura, my bad. I did not forget. I should have mentioned that earlier. I still have 5 days to not forget. But yeah,
this will be anniversary number 1, correct?
Numero uno, March 25th, 2023.
Look at that.
Oh, congratulations.
Not yet. I got to remember it in 5 days.
Okay, well.
Yeah,
but between this release and the next release.
Yeah, right. By the next episode, you guys can ask me, did you remember? And cross your fingers. I'll say yes. We'll be 1 for 1.
Man, again, just like Mitchell and Dustin said, I mean, this has been one of the best episodes, at least in terms from our standpoint of, I guess the way it makes us feel. I guess we've been one of the best for sure. And I'm sorry we didn't I was going to get to a phone call. Actually, my initial plan for the show, we were going to talk about some March Madness stuff, and I had a little game we were going to play, and maybe we'll do it next week. What is it, Dustin?
I said, and instead we just talked about madness.
Anyway, madness.
Life madness. So maybe we'll get a little more silly. I would like to hopefully find a balance, because about halfway through this initial conversation, part of me was wandering off thinking, how do I transition out of this? Because it wasn't something I wanted to transition out of because it didn't make sense. The conversation was just way too organic, and it's obviously better that way. And maybe what I'm learning is maybe I should just start coming into these shows without a plan and just see what happens.
Don't do that.
Because I think there was one time where I did
That
it.
show will be 7 minutes long.
Well, see, that's one thing where the one time where I remember doing it and feeling like I was just drowning, and hopefully it didn't come across like that on air, was one of our first 10 episodes. I believe the episode's called Grab Bag. And I had no idea where we were going direction wise. When I walked into it, I was just kind of seeing where it would go. But we were infants at this. We were babies. We were barely learning how to crawl on this podcast. And maybe we've, again, like Mitchell said, we've taken some steps forward.
I think you should always have a plan, because mostly me, I'm an idiot, and we'll get into aliens and conspiracies way too fast. So it's very important for John to keep us on the rails when you need to. But in something like this, we don't have to follow the plan. This was one of the most organic conversations I've had in a long time. So if we don't get to the plan, we don't get to the plan. But please, keep a plan.
Please have a plan, just in case.
And if you want to comment on anything that we talked about in today's episode, you can hit the hotline, 502-830-9195. We'd love for you to chime in. For those of you who did leave a call that I planned on getting to today, I apologize. Maybe we'll hit that next week. And there's also a chance, one more thing too. Maybe this is something we should talk about off the air, but I'll at least sort of tease it. We may have a guest next week, because in 2 weeks, I will, if we have a podcast, we may or may not do that. But in 2 weeks, I will not be here. I'll be out of town. I'll be at Disney World with some friends. And I want to bring on a different friend of mine who is someone that he's a self-proclaimed Disney adult. And obviously, if you're familiar with that term, we talked about it a while back. It's people, it's really younger millennials and older Gen Z who, they've taken their childhood into adulthood, which honestly, we all do that to an extent. And some people just do it in different ways. And one of those ways is being a fan of Disney and Disney World and all things Mickey Mouse, I guess. So we may have him on next week. I want him to teach me the ways of being a Disney adult and how to enjoy, I guess, get into that realm.
We're going to have a good conversation with him. I am very well versed. I haven't proclaimed myself a Disney adult, but the movies, I've seen them. So if he's I haven't been to Disney World since I was like 6, but I'm a big fan, so I can't wait. I don't even know who it is.
His name's, we'll go, and since we seem to be on board, I'll go ahead and say his name. His name's Elijah Butler. I have talked about him on this show before. If he's, I hate to say it like this, he's TikTok famous from his data analytics. Elijah Data from Home is his, I guess, his username. But we're not talking data analytics with him. We're going into the weeds with Disney. So
I want to do one thing, because I texted you guys about this today. I want some feedback. Okay? You guys know that I am a crazed Indiana football fan. And I want to connect with the few but the mighty crazy fans like me in some way. And I thought about whether we have meetups to watch the game or something, or I might throw up a live stream of myself watching the game, screaming at the TV. And if you want to jump in the chat and we can talk about what I'm seeing, you'll get a really raw reaction, which is probably a bad thing. But I want to be able to connect with people more. And I think that that's just in line with what we're talking about tonight. So that is obviously way down the road, but I would be curious whether on Twitter, call the hotline, message one of these two, whatever you're doing. I would be curious if you like football, if you like learning about X and O's, if you like talking broadest to the most specific things that are happening on a college football Saturday. I love to do that. So something that I want to do, I would like everyone to be a part of it. So if that's something you're interested in, please let me know. I'm going to start working on what that's going to look like. We got a lot of months before that happens, but something that I have in mind. So that I wanted to make sure I said that on this show, if that's something that people would be interested in follow along. And that's it. That's all I got.
That's going to be in high
Thanks
demand.
for listening.
I have one more thing. Just
Oh, sure.
we have not done YouTube comments in a while. Do we have YouTube comments?
We do. That's so I usually like them and reply to them when I see them because I get the notifications. I need to do a better job at reading them on the show, though. That's my bad.
Let's maybe next week we can slip in some YouTube comments too.
It's a good call. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that because I'm not the best at remembering. So that'll do it. Another long one. Hopefully, you guys, for those of you who stuck around, we appreciate you. And we'll be back again next week to do it all again. Subscribe on YouTube if you feel so inclined. If you found us on TikTok, then awesome. If you want to follow us on TikTok, you can do that as well at Out of Touch Media or Out of Touch Podcast. And until next week, we will talk to you next time. We appreciate you, and we'll see you.